Shabbat Shalom. Today's Torah portion is Vayeshev, and he settled. And the portion begins with the story of Jacob after his return to the land of Canaan. The central story, however, in this portion, and one that has so much drama and has had such an impact on Judaism throughout the centuries, of course, is the story of the sale of Joseph by his brothers. Joseph is a dreamer. He's a bit arrogant. His brothers are very jealous of him. Jacob seems to favor Joseph, which only serves to aggravate the jealousy of his brothers. And of course, ultimately, they plot initially to kill him, then they change their mind, and they sell him to a caravan of Ishmaelites who then bring him down to Egypt. What I would like to look at today is a bit of what this story, the sale of Joseph, has meant in Jewish tradition and how it has been expressed through prayer and poetry throughout the ages. And perhaps the most significant example of a treatment of the sale of Joseph is contained in a very ancient poem that has become a central part of the Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement prayers in the afternoon. And this poem is called Ele Eskera, These I Will Remember, and it actually tells the story of 10 very saintly, important rabbis during the Second Temple period who were murdered by the Romans. The story is told as if all 10 are of the same generation and all 10 are murdered at once. In fact, historically, these people were murdered over a period of decades, some during the Great Revolt when the temple was actually destroyed in 70 AD. Others were murdered later on when Hadrian was the emperor, and was part of the failure of the Bar Kokhba rebellion. Anyway, what's interesting about this poem, Ele Eskera, is that it starts out with a very interesting story. It tells the story of the Caesar, the Roman emperor, and he is studying the Bible. Now, of course, he's studying the Bible in order to ensnare the Jews, which becomes clear from the continuation of the story. He reaches a verse in Exodus that says, "He who kidnaps a person and sells him will be put to death." In other words, finds it's a capital crime to kidnap somebody and to sell them into slavery. He then gathers around him a number of very important sages, and he asks them, is it not true, according to Jewish law, that if you kidnap and sell someone into slavery, that your punishment is death? And they said, yes, absolutely. And so this Roman emperor asks these sages, so therefore, what was the punishment? Or how were your ancestors, the brothers of Joseph, punished for the fact that they sold him? And it's very interesting because the actual poem itself mentions the fact that he was sold to a caravan of Ishmaelites for some shoes. Now, of course, the question immediately is asked, what does shoes have to do with this particular story? Because it certainly is not present in the biblical story. Now, this poem, by the way, is based on a far more ancient source that tells a similar story, and there too mentions the issue of the shoes. Now, this week's Haftarah portion is from the book of Amos. And in Amos chapter 2, verse 6, we read as follows. Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel I will turn away his punishment, but for the 4th I will not turn away his punishment, because they sold the righteous for silver and the poor for a pair of shoes. Now, the literal meaning of this verse in Amos has nothing to do with the sale of Joseph. It is talking about the mistreatment by the rich of the poor during this period that Amos is referring to, and it's part of an entire chapter where he criticizes the moral behavior of the people of Israel and Judah at this time. However, it is this line from the book of Amos that has been the source for this idea of shoes. In Amos, it's used just to mean shoes being something that's such a basic possession of a person, and they would persecute someone or make it difficult for him, a poor person, to buy something as basic and as simple as shoes. However, it is picked up here in the later sources when referring to the sale of Joseph. And actually, I think there's a very interesting statement here, and I've just really given you two examples how the sources treat this chapter in Amos on the one hand, and how this prayer, which we read on Yom Kippur, is treated on the other. The prayer on Yom Kippur, however, is part of an atonement prayer. And indeed, I believe what our tradition is telling us about the sale of Joseph is that it is probably one of the most horrific deeds that were ever done in the Bible. It is the precursor of every civil war that ever happened in the Bible or within the nation of Israel. And the whole notion of civil war became a complete and total anathema within Judaism after the Second Temple period. It was during that period of time when the wars and dissensions within the Jewish people reached an unbelievable climax, to the extent that our sages have said that the reason the Second Temple was destroyed was because of the terrible infighting that was going on within the Jewish people. And I believe that what our tradition has essentially said is that it has pointed its finger to the sale of Joseph as the initial sin, as that original sin that brought upon us after that so many different incidences of civil war and of hatred with one another. And since that time, since the time of the Second Temple period, we have not seen that kind of infighting and civil war, and hopefully we never will again. And I think as we view events in Israel and around the world within the Jewish people, I believe that today it is as strong as ever that no matter what happens, no matter how much disagreement we have within ourselves, we will never allow it to reach the level of civil war. Brother will not turn against brother. Shabbat Shalom from Samaria.